Hi everyone, and welcome to our first Open Courtauld Hour of 2021. So back in March, I could not have predicted the appetite for this series or that we would be continuing to provide these events solely through Zoom almost a year later. So I'm Layla, and I hold special responsibility for all things Open Courtauld, and actually Open Courtauld Hour itself became a little bit of an obsession and escape in 2020 for me. And because of that, I'm thrilled to be back in 2021 and to launch this year's programme with a really different hour, radical printmaking. So people who have tuned into some of our Open Courtauld events before will know that we often use a magazine format with lots of short talks and performances. But today is actually more about giving you all the opportunity to create things through the medium of printmaking and to really contextualise works in our collection in the present day, to really essentially help us all find relevance and inspiration after a pretty tough year. And for this reason, we start today by honouring our absolutely expansive print collection. So the Courtauld has one of the most significant collections of works on paper in Britain, with approximately 27,000 prints ranging from the Middle Ages to the 20th century avant-garde. This evening, we are also celebrating our wonderful partnership with Ulster Museum. So radical printmaking aligns with and explores the exhibition Renoir in the New Era, Impressionist works from the Courtauld. This exhibition and the prints included explore the Impressionists in the late 1900s, refocusing attention on their position as agitators and anarchists against the established art system. And I know so many of us, I know in my case this is true, will have wanted to visit Belfast and the exhibition in real life, and I hope this will, to some degree, fulfill that craving to be immersed in culture and gallery spaces again. So moving on from this, we will go from the historic and be transported to the now, hearing from practicing artists, radical and continuing on in the tradition of artists in our collection. And then to end, we will have an activity that we can all do at home. So just a quick bit of housekeeping before we start. We will probably have time for around 2 questions for each of the presentations today, which I will pose after the presentations. If you have any questions or comments, you have a few options of how to send them to us. You can put them in the chat, which we will open in a little while, or you can send them to us on Twitter or Instagram. Our handle is @CourtauldRes. And it would also be amazing if you are inspired to create anything that you do, send those through to us as well. We'll put all this information in the chat just so you can access it easily as well. Okay, great. So now I'm excited to introduce you all to Anna, who we've been collaborating with closely on tonight's event. So Anna Lighting is Curator of Art at the National Museums Northern Ireland. Here, Anna is responsible for the Works of Art on Paper collection and the Arts Council of Northern Ireland Gifted Collection. Anna curated Renoir in the New Era and has worked closely with the Research Forum team since we ran ResFest Belfast, I think back in 2018, which seems like a lifetime ago. So thank you, Anna, for being here this evening. It's wonderful to see you. If you want to turn your cam on just now. Oh, there you are. Yeah, it's great to see you, even if it is just on a screen. Just before you started, I wanted to ask how you guys have been getting on with the COVID restrictions. It must be really difficult to put on all this work and then for the exhibition to close so shortly after it opened.
It's been tough, but we were very lucky that we got open for a week just before Christmas, and we had a really good response to the exhibition and a lot of visitors in that first week. So it was a really good way to give a taster to the show, and then now obviously everybody's itching for it to be open again. And luckily, working with yourselves and everyone at the Courtauld, we've been able to extend the exhibition, so we know when we get to open again, people can come and see the show. But we are lucky because of things like this and technology now that we've been able to share so much of the exhibition with people online, and even if you can't get to it, you can experience it from home, and we're excited to be able to do that. So it was good to have that little taster, but yes, yeah, we can't wait to be able to open the galleries again for everyone.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Anna, again, and I will pass it over to you if that's okay to get started.
I'll just start my little screen share. Thank you all for taking the time to join us this evening. I'm just going to turn my camera off just for this presentation, and then I'll turn it back on whenever we have questions, just to make sure we have full high quality connection throughout my talk. So, my current exhibition, Renoir and the New Era, Impressionist works from the Courtauld Collection, part of the Courtauld Connect project, which is a mouthful, takes Renoir's La Loge as its centrepiece to explore the notion of the Impressionists being radical and groundbreaking, and also the place of women, both as subjects and artists within Impressionism. So I'm not going to give you a talk on Renoir and the New Era this evening, as the full exhibition, as I said, is available online through the Smartify app, which includes my full gallery text and additional audio. Also, further text exploring the themes can be found on our museum website. There is also an episode of my podcast, The Fine Print, in which I discuss the place of printmaking in Impressionism with the Courtauld print curator, Dr. Rachel Sloan. And we also talk about that expansive and amazing works on paper collection held within the Courtauld that Layla mentioned. Links will be provided to that in the chat for you to look at afterwards in your own time. And of course, as the exhibition features works from the Courtauld Collection, there are countless resources available through the Courtauld channels that explore La Loge and the Impressionists. Tonight, I want to look at some of the works on paper in the exhibition, specifically 2 prints and a drawing, and use them as a starting point to explore how print is a natural art form to platform radical agendas, and how specifically women printmakers have been at the forefront of using the media to put forward socialist and feminist ideas. Also, just to say, when I'm speaking of radical, I mean what I consider to be positive radical notions or behaviours, agitating and disrupting the norm to bring forth ideas and issues in order to create a more diverse, accepting and fairer society. I really am just going to touch the surface though tonight, and to keep it to the late 19th and early 20th century mostly, though there is obviously so much more to say on this subject. There are 2 prints by Bertha Morisot in the exhibition. These dry point etchings are interesting in themselves, as Bertha Morisot didn't display her prints or exhibit her prints in her own lifetime. So the intimacy and privacy of them takes on even more meaning. Though she did exhibit the subject matters within them through her painting, she often depicted modern motherhood, sadly something that is often considered radical to depict, and female domesticity of that time, through images of her and her child like this one on the left, or images of her sister, like the painting on the right. And this is a painting of her sister while pregnant, when it was still considered at a time of confinement, a time not to be seen. And she also didn't treat motherhood in her paintings as a symbol of religious narrative or universal female fertility, but the truth of it, the day-to-day. Morisot's place in Impressionism, along with the likes of Mary Cassatt, is an example of how the Impressionist group provided more open opportunity for different types of artists. And as I do state in the exhibition, the mere presence of women artists at these shows legitimized critical opinion of the Impressionists being radical. Another printmaker featured in the exhibition, though actually through this drawing on the left, is Camille Pissarro, who is known for his printmaking and his politics. He, as far as I'm aware, was the only Impressionist who actually labelled himself as politically an anarchist. Pissarro was also known for his landscapes, and he would often show manual labourers and workers in these images. They weren't just really these kind of ideal images of beautiful French countryside. They showed activity, they showed the practical. And it's interesting how this notion of showing the practicalities and truth of human existence, that there are people to tend to and care for the land, that show the working classes, has at times been considered radical. And that's something we should ask ourselves. Why? Why is the sharing of the truth considered radical? Why is creating visual access radical? It has a lot to do with systems of power and their impact on the control of visual culture. Print, more often than not, creates art in the multiple. It shifts control. It can be disseminated to the many, long before the age of digital sharing. Another artist who showed this truth, similar to Pissarro, was Claire Leighton. Her specific print practice was about showing the wealthy and growing interwar middle class who could purchase the beautiful books of wood engraving she produced for small private presses. It was about showing them that the food they ate, the clothes they wore, the countryside that they enjoyed, was all a product of people's work, and often of women's work. Her most successful book, A Farmer's Year, highlighted the poverty of farm workers. Her prints, such as a version of this one on the right, were produced in the New Leader Socialist magazine. In a review of her book, her most successful book, Southern Harvest, which looked at the rural industries of the southern states of America, American Folklore magazine described Layton as understanding us better than we understand ourselves. Now, why does print sit as this natural media for the radical? It could be the nature of the idea of the multiple itself. Print makes art accessible. Whether that be through the art form being used to illustrate mass-produced socialist or feminist texts, such as Time and Tide magazine, associated with the 6 Point Group, who Gwen Raveret contributed to. Raveret, like Layton, was another central force within the wood engraving revival, a revival driven by women artists whose socialist beliefs were often at the heart of their practice. What we also find with print artists, and very much so in the wood engraving revival, is a desire to use their place of privilege in order to create fairer attitudes and practices, in addition to access to these images. We see this with Layton, and we also see this with Margaret Pilkington, who is a woman I am on a personal mission to champion. And if there are any Manchester locals who know more about her, please do feel free to get in touch with me. Pilkington believed that her responsibility was to use her privilege to support social causes and help provide equal access to the arts. She was a pioneer of arts education in museums, believing that by opening up museum collections to the public, their opportunities towards wider education also expanded. Another thing that we should consider is that the concept of the multiple goes beyond the very output of prints. It is also ingrained in the means of production. A print is often not about the individual artwork, and sometimes not even about the individual artists. The nature of the equipment needed to produce it means that the print collective, studio, or press is something common in art history and current practice. So in Ireland, we had the Dun Emer Guild that became the Koala Press, founded by Lily and Elizabeth Yates. It was at the centre of the Celtic Revival, which was an effort to define Irish identity through culture and the arts. Or further afield, you have Taller de Gráfica Popular, or People's Graphic Workshop, founded in Mexico in 1937. The collective ethos was to platform revolutionary social causes through art. Many artists from all over the world spent time there, including Elizabeth Catlett. Elizabeth Catlett said that the purpose of her art was to present Black people in their beauty and dignity for ourselves and others to understand and enjoy. And it keeps coming back to this notion of radical being the representation of and creating access to the truth. And really just normal for many day-to-day life through the multiple image. Now, before I finish, I'm just going to briefly bring us right up to now, right up to present day, and one of my most recent acquisitions to the Ulster Museum collection by the wonderful Elaine Shemelt, who we're about to hear from. It could be said that in her current practice, she sees her place as an artist as a place in which she needs to represent the truth of the climate crisis. But before we hear from Elaine, let's travel back to the 19th century, back to Marceau, back to the domestic, an interesting subject matter in the context of Impressionism, a movement that we associate with capturing the modernity of public Paris. Women in Paris at that time, though awarded more freedom than women in many other countries, if they were privileged, were still restricted in how they traversed the city. The domestic was their most easily accessible subject. The domestic was their truth. And something that I always mention when looking back at women artists is that we need to adjust our 21st century lens. What we see as not being radical now could be seen as radical then. And though these are images of the domestic, confined to that because of the patriarchal structure, we must remember and appreciate that this was Marceau in her own way, pushing the line of art and print beyond what it was before, being radical, which is really what we could say that art is for. What was she though trying to say with these prints, with these images? And it's not always about what we choose to read from them. And she was saying something. And I just want to finish with her own words. The truth is that our value lies in feeling, in intention, in our vision that is subtler than that of men. And we can accomplish a great deal, provided that affectation, pedantry, and sentimentalism do not spoil everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. That was really great.
We're a lot of ashes, but
I know so much to cover in such a short time, and you've done such a great job there. And we're getting quite a lot of comments in the chat just saying how wonderful it is to talk about women artists and that we should do that more, which I definitely agree with. And Suman is asking if you know the work of Zarina Hashmi.
I don't think so.
No, someone to look
at. Yeah, definitely, because my main area of research is women artists and women printmakers, but it's something that it's, especially because of the way women artists are recorded, even though it's something I spend most of my day doing, there's still so many that I'm not aware of, and there's always just so much to uncover and look into. And even in the preparation for this talk, I was like, oh, this is a whole new research project to explore.
Yeah, definitely. It's always the problem of the fact that a lot of women, even if they were artists, didn't actually publicize their work because they were worried that they wouldn't make it, etc. So another question we've got from Anna is, do I detect a Japanese print influence on the Mary Cassatt images, especially in the rather flat presentation of material in the clothes?
There's a lot of Japanese influence among printmakers, especially with Mary Cassatt and a lot of artists of that time, because of just sort of interest in Japanese culture and aesthetics at that time. And then you also find it again in the print engraving revival, and a lot of those, Margaret Pilkington actually signed her prints in the way a Japanese artist would sign their prints. She created her own Japanese version of a signature. So it's something that you do see coming in again and again throughout printmaking.
Yeah, definitely. And the next question we have is if you can recommend any texts to begin to look at women printmakers.
There's some great books, and Pat Jaffe is one of my main kind of go-tos for text. I also have a publication I wrote myself called Making Her Mark, that is kind of a nice overview of what happened with the print engraving revival. It really focuses on the Ulster Museum collection. So it takes the Ulster Museum collection from the early sort of 1800s right up to the 60s, looking at women's impact on printmaking. And that will be available on our website very soon. But it was actually, I wrote it back in 2018. But Pat Jaffe is a really good one. And I can also, whenever we put this up on the YouTube, I can put a little reading list together for people, because there's been a wonderful, there's been a lot of great writings on women printmakers over the years.
Yeah, definitely.
And actually that one, that the Dunedin Press image was taken from a good book that looked at the Dunedin Guild as well.
Great. I think that's probably the only time we have for questions for you, Anna. Sorry, because there is quite a lot coming in. Sorry, everyone. We tried to get through.
I just saw someone saying about Kollwitz. I really wanted to talk about her, but I just didn't have time because I feel like I could just talk about her for about 3 days. So you have to, it's very hard to cut everybody's on.
Yeah, and these events are just for a little taster of what we have going on. So maybe in the future, if people are really interested in learning more, we can try and program something else with you, Anna, as well.
That'd be
great. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you very much.
So what we're going to do now is fast forward to the present, and I'm delighted to introduce everyone to Elaine Shemelt. And Elaine is an artist and a researcher, especially known as a printmaking image maker. She's a pioneer of early feminist video and a multimedia installation. Elaine continues to address the impact of war, conflict, censorship and constraint on psychologies and environments in her work. At the moment, Elaine is based in Dundee at Duncan and Jordanston. So welcome to Open Courtauld Hour, Elaine. Thank you for taking the time to join us. And as I said earlier, I'm very jealous that you're in Dundee, actually in Scotland, because I haven't been able to get back in over a year. So how is it up there?
Well, I was just going to apologise for pre-recording my talk, but it's cold and the weather's pretty awful, actually. windy and snowing, and my Wi-Fi is not terribly reliable, so that's why I pre-recorded this little talk. But otherwise, yes, I'm up here on the east coast of Scotland, quite a long way north. Yes, in Broughty Ferry.
Oh, well, it's great to have you. So as you've just mentioned, we are actually going to share Elaine's presentation for her, and then we'll come back and we'll both come back on camera and we'll get to your questions. So we'll do that just now for you.
Okay.
Thanks.
What is radical printmaking? For each of us, the use of the word radical may imply something completely different. My use of the term radical would be to describe something that's different from anything that's come before, a departure from tradition. I would hope that it was innovative, it might be far-reaching, it might even be unorthodox. But for me, the importance of the word radical in art is that it's characterized by a process of independent thought. Traditionally, we printmakers were bottom of the pecking order of artists. Printmaking was even referred to as the poor man's painting. If you couldn't afford a painting, then perhaps you could compromise with a print. Feminist critics have done a lot of research work into 19th century women's oil paintings. The vast majority of art made by women in that period was in the medium of watercolour. Not that I want to denigrate watercolour as a medium in any way. But watercolour used to be regarded as a deprivileged, marginalised medium. The machismo of oil painting was actually the thing to aspire to. The artists Cassatt and Morisot were appropriately lauded for achieving the status of that world. But they were unusual and a minority amongst women artists. Printmaking also tended to be considered as a poor relation to painting and sculpture. Released from this hegemony of power, printmakers are liberated and can embrace new technologies. The medium covers such a broad spectrum of techniques and enables such a richness in terms of visual language. As a printmaker, you can do almost anything. However, radical printmaking carries two particular aspects or responsibilities. A new technique enables the artist to move the boundaries of interpretation. But an image itself can also move the boundaries of interpretation. Often the two go together, but not necessarily. To be radical, printmakers must do more than to seize upon the currency of new ideas. We must create the currency of new ideas. Some of us are then obliged to spend the rest of our lives putting our beliefs into action, and our role as artists comes with heavy responsibilities. I began my career in the 1970s. I was a self-conscious, ideological thinker, challenging and justifying my distinctly female and sometimes feminist artistic language and practice. In this very early work, I worked with a simple idea. I am a body, and I also have a body. Biological functions, physiological processes, sensations, and desires all leave their traces, like imprints, on people. Lived experiences accumulate in and on the body. They form layers of engravings, resonances, and interferences where traces of earlier inscriptions shine from beneath the writings in and on the body. In my 20s, it didn't occur to me that there were limitations or rules about printmaking. I used the body as a palimpsest. There was nothing particularly radical about using my body, of course, but it became interesting when I moved the boundaries of interpretation. Printmaking led me to convey complex ideas and insights beyond the still image into a realm of new visual perspectives. These images are from my series of work called The Bell Jar, a definite reference to Sylvia Plath's book and her exquisite title. They're about trying to cope with what's going on all around by seeking refuge in a safe place. The trouble is that if you hide under a bell jar, you can still see the world, but the glass is curved and the world is distorted. Not only that, the world sees you differently as well. Printmaking taught me to think in layers. It was this aesthetic manipulation of the image that gave me the confidence to try to communicate on both a social and psychological level with my artworks. I wanted to make art that went beyond the perceived limitations and broke with tradition. Having initially trained as a sculptor, followed up by a printmaking degree, it always seemed to me that everything was potentially interchangeable. The importance lay in the interpretation. I don't consider my use of the technique to be particularly radical. Experimental, yes, but technique for technique's sake is not the issue. Much later, I became interested in printmaking when I'm developing scientific understanding through collaboration and a new visual language. The blend of knowledge and experience where together the scientist and the artist move the boundaries of interpretation. These images are created from the genome sequence of Erwinia, which is a potato pathogen. Working with scientists from the Scottish Crop Research Institute, I was attempting to convey the scientists' insights and scientific discoveries beyond the still print. The end results went beyond traditional printmaking and even included music and digital animation. But scientifically and visually, we were unpicking the complexity of the scientific data. Mutual understanding and contemporary printmaking were key to the collaboration. As a follow-on from the work with the crop research scientists, I was asked to interpret the scales of life on the new CTIR building in Dundee. Established in 2012, the Discovery Centre for Translational and Interdisciplinary Research, CTIR, translates research discoveries into healthcare solutions. The CTIR is a centre of excellence for fighting the diseases of the developing world, and in 2017 became the Wellcome Centre for Anti-Infectives Research. My overarching concern was that this series of images should reflect in a meaningful way what sort of scientific research was being undertaken within this CTIR building. A blend of knowledge and experience was required, where together the scientist and the artist move the boundaries of interpretation. This meant that as an artist, I had to get to grips with the essence of the four main scales of life and to try to deal with the intangible notion of their size. I had to go along with a feeling, or if you like, a visual abstraction of what is meant by, for example, tissue. The concept should have a strong feel and presence. It should pose questions without being in danger of resulting in a loud visual interruption imposed on the sides of the building. The essence of contemporary printmaking, radical or otherwise, lies in a process of empirical experimentation, discovery, analysis, resolution, and critical reflection. The pursuit of the image, an image or series of images, which rather than being locked down into the limited edition, offer the possibility of a new visual language of unlimited imagery. Printmaking doesn't need to be defined nor confined by tradition or medium. But it must always be remembered that art-science collaborations are not mere descriptions. They are an intelligent response to a problem that needs to be addressed. I grew up in Northern Ireland, and I was educated in Belfast during some of the worst of the conflict. Consequently, a lot of my early work refers to the side effects or after effects of the direct conflict of war. In 1996, the war in the former Yugoslavia was still raging. I was commissioned to make an exhibition in the Edinburgh Festival about the war. War is something that you and I can't really control. But is there some way that we can affect the situation? For all of us, it's an ongoing question. These installations were my response to my feelings. What am I thinking about war? War in Syria, for example. What can I do about the refugee crisis? Ultimately, a work of art is simply an image under which lies a hidden sense of the artist's personal and emotional world. Sometimes this allows for an awareness that we might recognize as spiritual, although many people have the view that everything can be explained through contemporary physics without the help of anything supersensible. As I was working on this, I got an email from the commander of the British forces in the Falkland Islands. He asked me to undertake a project funded by the British military. Consequently, 20 years ago, I flew 8,000 miles in a military aircraft to the Falkland Islands. As a printmaker, it was here that I learnt something of the true value of visual thinking when I collaborated with people from an entirely different background. By working with the military, I appreciated differences and strengths when strategic thinking was combined with a visual language. I centred my work around the old buildings in Ajax Bay. During the 1982 war, the field hospital was run by the surgeon Rick Jolly, who demanded that both British and Argentinian casualties be treated equally. He was determined that none should die in his field hospital. For me, that was significant. I come from mixed heritage. My father was British, and my mother was born and brought up in Argentina. I've lived a lot of my life in Scotland, but I grew up in Belfast during a war. These details had an impact upon my view as an artist. During my time in the Falkland Islands, I became aware of this other island, much closer to the Antarctic, South Georgia, a 100-mile-long island in the middle of a vast expanse of nutrient-rich ocean in the sub-Antarctic. I switched from a focus on people's post-war trauma to an environmental focus. As a consequence, for the past 20 years, I've been heavily involved in the environmental management of South Georgia. So how does this work? I'm not a scientist, I'm not a politician, and technically, I'm not an environmentalist. I'm a printmaker. To talk about South Georgia is to talk about one of the last places on the planet that's absolutely remote. This is somewhere that has an almost complete lack of visual interference or man-made infrastructure. The conditions are extreme and hostile towards mankind, but I could see that nature had the potential to heal itself. I also work with maps. A map is a tool, a vehicle if you like. It provides the means for an imaginary journey, a way of entering an inaccessible environment. In Antarctica proper, the dry valleys have a deep time aspect that's quite surreal. It's a completely alien environment with no human valences. It's almost beyond human comprehension. By that I mean that we can understand the physical and geological record, but not understand the place on an emotional level. If you're wondering what I mean by the words no human valences, I mean to describe the lack of physical yearning, to be in such an environment where everything recognizable is petrified. My printmaking is intended to extend experiences, ideas and concepts. When I was in my 20s, it was specific to certain feminine cultural spaces and concerns. Now I'm in my 60s, and it's aimed at making a contribution to cross-cultural understanding of significant conservation issues. Art offers a way of researching into these realms and possibly to build a bridge between nature and the human spirit. To quote Rudolf Steiner, destiny is the result of two factors, which grow together in the life of a human being. One streams outwards from the inner depths of the soul, the other comes to meet man from the world around him. In conclusion, my own interpretation of radical printmaking simply means that we do not need to be defined or confined by tradition. The opportunities offered by this medium allow printmakers to be truly radical. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elaine. So great to see the parallels as well there between what you and Anna have discussed this evening. And I guess it feels, I think someone said this in the chat as well, it does feel more pertinent during this pandemic when you see the inequalities and actually how indisputable it is, and that creativity can be something to advocate for change and to help. So we have quite a lot of questions. So the first one we have is, do you think printmaking is still seen as a poor relation to oil painting, or has this changed?
Well, personally, I would say it's changed. I think it's because of, I think really in the 21st century, it changed because of digital technology, really. I think that it was like a sort of revolution, a bit like lithography. When Sennefelder developed lithography, there was a kind of revolution of image making. And I think that happened towards the end of the 20th century and into the 21st century with the silicon chip, quite frankly. So I would say, no, we're not the poor man's relation anymore to painting.
Great, I agree. And I think that actually brings us really well onto the next question, which is, where do you think radical printmaking might go next? More towards integration with other media like installation works, or more site-specific in spaces which you might not fully expect?
Well, I maintain that a printmaker can do anything. That's why I veered towards printmaking, because I realized that it was such a versatile medium. You can do something from, if you think about, I mean, bearing in mind the age I am, but thinking about the newspaper image, which reached so many people, and now digital technology, we are so versatile, we can do anything. And it seems to me that painting and sculpture are the poor relations. So feel empowered, you printmakers.
That's so great, thank you. And also such a motivational and inspiring presentation. You've lived such an exciting life, and it was so great to have you here tonight to hear more about it. So thank you again, Elaine. And that brings us actually perfectly onto our next segment of the evening. So I hope everyone is ready to get a bit more creative and have a go at making something themselves. Nathan is going to deliver his one-off workshop inspired partly by the prints in the Courtauld Collection. So Nathan is an artist based in Belfast who also works at the Ulster Museum as a Discover Art facilitator. Recently, he completed a Master's in Fine Art at the University of Ulster, and his current work investigates the potential of moving image within the wide cube environment. And just a flag before we start, which I've put in the chat as well, is that you can rewatch this on YouTube. So don't feel pressure to run around your house and collect things to make just now. You can revisit this tomorrow. So Nathan, I hope your Wi-Fi is holding up just now and that you've returned to us. You've made it back. This is
just about.
This always happens on our live events, that everyone's Wi-Fi fails. But thank you again for joining us today. And before we kick off with your workshop, which is actually going to be in the form of a video which you've pre-recorded, I wondered if you wanted to just say anything or introduce what inspired you for this activity today.
Well, the activity was really inspired by the fact that we're in lockdown at the moment. I have no idea what people have in their houses. I'm not expecting people to follow me exactly, but it's just ideas. It's to get people thinking about what's around them, what they can print with, and all that is kind of within the frame of an absurdist, Brachtian, strange video. So I hope you like.
It is great. Thank you again. And we will share that video just now for you. Thanks, Nathan.
Oh. Introduction, take one, action.
Hello and welcome to this radical printmaking workshop.
And this is what I sound like. Cut. Aww. Ooh. Thanks. Hey Nathan, this is your brain talking. Do you think it's possible to create a print from only things from around your house? Yes. Okay then, let's go. Actually, I'm gonna have this. Okay, let's get started. For my first print, I'm going to attempt a relief print. This is going to get messy, so I decided to use my old studio desk to work on. Ooh! For my relief print, I used polystyrene from an old food container, water-soluble felt-tip pens, and some printer paper, a damp cloth, and an old pen to draw with. So I drew out my cloud design. Then I coloured it in using my felt tip pens, blending the colours together. Oh, can we see that again but zoomed in? Perfect. Be careful not to add too much water. Some trial and error is required at this stage. And now it's time to print. You don't need to add too much pressure to get a successful print. This is a simple and easy printmaking technique that looks great and is lots of fun. Now remember, when doing relief print, your print will be backwards. Now let's try something slightly harder. How about a screen print? Let's check it out. To make the stencil, I used thick paper, a craft knife, and the back of an old sketchbook to cut on. For the screen, I used an old artwork, some tights, a stapler, tape, more tape, and some paint. Remember when cutting out your stencil that the pieces removed are the pieces that will be printed. Always be careful when using a craft knife, and always cut away from yourself. For this stage, you could also use scissors. Now leave your stencil to the side. It's time to start working on building our screen. Here I am struggling to attach the tights to the frame. You really want to take your time and try to get a tight on the frame. This will make it easier to print later on. Mine could have been a little bit better. I positioned the stencil on my homemade screen and stuck it down with masking tape and packing tape. Honestly, I went a bit overboard here. For my first test, I used oil paint, but found that it worked better with acrylic. But you could also use poster paint. My first print was a success, and my stencil and frame were better than I could have ever imagined. I went on to print 10 more images with the screens before my stencil decided to give up. Let's check them out. Next, I added some green watercolour paint to contrast with the red stencil, and added some detail with a pen. And also, if you look closely out the window, you might recognise those clouds from earlier. Amazing! Why not have a look around your house to see what things you could print with? I'd love to see them. Use the hashtag on screen when posting your artworks to social media. Good luck, and I can't wait to see what you come up with. See you soon.
Oh, thank you, Nathan, for that. That was really great. And everyone, again, I've seen a few comments in the chat again about the recording. That will go on YouTube tomorrow, and I'll also send it out via Eventbrite so you can all get that when it's ready. Thank you for all taking part this evening, and also to our participants, Anna, Elaine and Nathan. If you like tonight, please do sign up for our next Open Courtauld Hour, Indecent Exposure, on the 4th of March. This episode will question why some images of naked women are sanctioned as fine art, appropriate and unabashedly displayed in family-friendly spaces, yet some images of naked women are censored from those exact same spaces and beyond due to assumed overt sexuality. As well, I just wanted to flag that our lovely short courses team are holding multiple study tours. So have a look at what's going on with them by visiting our website. I will drop the link in the chat just now so you can all see that. And apart from that, that's us all done for today. So thank you very much for joining us, and we'll hope to see you soon.